Hello, this is Denise Wetzel, and I'm going to attempt to do a voiceover of this PowerPoint presentation. It's actually just a ton of pictures of Mark, and I'm going to have to go through it pretty quickly because there's so many pictures, and they won't probably always line up with to the time I'm speaking because I have a lot of pictures of when he's older. But I just wanted you to have something to look at, so you just didn't have to listen to me the whole time. But I'm going to talk a little bit about Mark and when he was diagnosed when he was younger, and then as he got older, we were thinking about employment for him, and then we got hooked up into the spelling. So I'm just going to touch on those subjects today. So Mark was born in North Carolina in January 11th, 2001. So in January, he'll be 23 years old. And when he was first born, felt really fortunate because I got in with this. We just called it our baby group, but it was actually an organized program to help parents basically to read to their children. And so for 10 weeks, a group of moms with new babies met. I mean, we're talking like less than 3 months old, so just brand new babies. We would meet every week and we would read to the babies and just talk about being a new parent. And it was great because I had that connection with other moms and I knew what they were going through. But also at the same point, right away, I could tell something was different with Mark. He actually could not attend to the baby group a lot of times. I think it was like overstimulating for him. But it was great, again, because I had a way to kind of like compare, different babies and their reactions to things. And when he got older, our group continued to meet after the 10-week program was over, and sometimes we met at people's homes. And one time I remember the babies were all going to be about 2 years old, so they weren't really babies anymore. This one child said that we were going to have pie a la mode. And I guess that just was like a turning point for me or something, because Mark couldn't even say mama. And this child was saying, we're going to have pie a la mode. So that set me down the rabbit hole. Let's see. At first, you go for a hearing test to make sure that they're hearing properly. And let me just say also that it wasn't like Mark never said any words, because we would go to the park and he would point at every tree and he'd be like, tree, tree, tree. And then the next week he'd be pointing at all the dogs and say, dog, dog, dog. But what happened was, like, he would say a word and then I never heard him say it again. So it was really mysterious. It was also just confusing because, when you go to the pediatrician, they say, well, are they speaking? I'm like, yeah, I heard him say all these cheese, I think was actually his very first word he ever said, which is kind of unusual because usually they're saying mama or dada. And so this child was saying, we're going to have pie a la mode, and Mark wasn't even saying mama on a consistent basis yet. So they checked his hearing, they said it was fine. Then at that point, I remember them saying, well, he might have a developmental delay. And I was like, what's that? I had zero idea. I really did. I just was very, I don't know, naive, if that's the right word, or just uninformed. But I did not know what they were talking about, because he just seemed to me like he was a little boy who couldn't talk. Okay. So we got into speech therapy. Excuse me. And I remember that I had a parenting magazine one day. There was an article about speech delays in it, and in the corner, in a little sub corner, it said maybe it's more than a speech delay. And I think it was talking in there about autism. I took the magazine to the speech therapist and I said, do you think there's something else going on here? And she said, yeah, I think you should see the psychologist. And we were really fortunate because there were, I guess in a way, because there's a psychologist that worked in that office with the speech therapist and some occupational therapist. So we went to the psychologist. He did this big assessment and he said, yes, because I just remember saying, I'm sorry, your son has autism. Again, I had no idea what that meant. I knew it wasn't good, but I didn't know what this meant for us and our journey with Mark. Okay, let's see. About this time also, there was just a lot of other fluctuation in our life. Henry had lost his job in North Carolina, and he had actually moved to Florida, and we stayed back. to sell our home. Mark and I did, and that took about 5 months. Then we moved to Florida. We continued with the speech therapist. We found a really super awesome occupational therapist in Florida. And also, I started a home program of applied behavior analysis. They call it ABA for short. Basically, it was doing a lot of these individual trials. Excuse me, they were receptive trials because he didn't have the speech. So, for example, I made these flashcards, lots of flashcards, and we'd put down 3 flashcards. I actually hired a lady to come in the home that would work with him and do all these trials. And so the first one, you start simple with colors. So, okay, give me the red flashcard, give me the green flashcard. And we move on to like shapes. Give me the triangle, give me the rectangle. Then you introduce letters, excuse me, and numbers, and capital letters versus small letters, and the sounds of the letters. So give me the letter that says "ba." And he was just knocking out. Of course, we moved up to words, and he's knocking it out of the park. He's only 3 to 5 when I'm talking about right now. So he's a very young child, and I knew he knew the information. He just couldn't say it. So that was kind of frustrating for all of us, obviously. Let's see, after that we moved to Idaho. Here's a picture of Idaho. This is actually on the top of Moscow Mountain when we first moved down to Moscow. But first we had moved up to Coeur d'Alene, and that was really great. We had some really great, nice services up in Coeur d'Alene. And then when Mark was about 9 years old, I went through a program called Partners in Policy Making. And this was a program for parents with children with disabilities and also for self-advocates. And the program we met for 8 months, I think it was. Once a month we would meet for like the whole weekend. And they would cover like one specific area really in depth. So for example, one time we met and talked about education. It's all about IEPs and how to set good goals, educational goals for your child, and how to get their services met in the school. Another time they talked about employment, and specifically they mentioned a lot about self-employment. And this really planted a seed in me because they were giving all the benefits of self-employment and how it's very flexible. You can work as much or as little as you would like. It's easy to tailor a job around the individual's interest and skill level. So this really planted a seed in my head, and I started thinking, just really ruminating on this for years about what could Mark do, because I knew he wasn't going to have like a regular 8 to 5 type of job, right? That wasn't in the cards for us. So I just thought about this a lot. And okay, this is a picture of some of the people that I went through that Partners in Policy Making with, and this is where we're actually in the Capitol. And a lot of it, as you can probably tell from the title, Partners in Policy Making, we did go and speak with our local representatives and senators in the state of Idaho. That's what one of the times we met was all about advocacy. And it was great. I'm actually good friends with a lot of these people in this picture still to this day. So this was in 2010. Then in 2011, this movie came out called Wretches and Jabberers. You used to be able to watch it on Netflix, but I'm sure you can find it if you really wanted to stream it somehow online. I think through Amazon. I think you can now. So these two men, they both type for communication, they use facilitated communication, and I don't have a lot of, it's actually kind of controversial, the facilitated communication, and I don't have time to go into the details of that right now, but I was just, and in the movie, it's like kind of a documentary, they travel the world and they meet with other typers, and this just like totally captured my attention, right? And in the corner, I'll try to read this, what it says. It says, position people around child who make it their mission to push his intelligence out through an iPad. Listen to his inner voice, not his outward autistic voice. And I'm going to try to explain this a little bit, and they're talking a little bit about apraxia, which is when there's kind of a brain-body disconnect. It's like the individual's brain saying do this, but their body just does something else, and they totally can't control it. So what he is kind of saying is that if you can get them to type or communicate through an iPad or through some type of, augmentative device, then listen to that and not their behavior, or even what they're saying. And I've read some things about, to jump ahead a little bit, spellers that have said they've actually spelled out, don't listen to my words, what I say. And for example, this one girl was saying she was always asking for Chick-fil-A, and so obviously they're so happy, like, oh, she wants Chick-fil-A, she wants Chick-fil-A, and they would get her Chick-fil-A. And then when she finally got to spell, she's like, I don't like Chick-fil-A. Okay, so her body was saying something, and they can't control it. Okay, so they're called unreliable speakers sometimes because of that. And I got a lot more to say about spelling later. Another individual I got to meet was this young man. He's from Japan, and he was actually in the States at a conference in Syracuse that I went to. And this is a great book. And I think he wrote this book when he was 13. He's also a typer, and he literally cannot keep his body still. He has to be moving like constantly all the time. I think it's a little bit better now that he's older. And they actually did just make a movie about him, and it is on Netflix. I don't have Netflix right now, so I haven't watched it, but I heard it's really good if anybody wants to learn some more. I really think I'm going to try to watch it over the holiday season, though. So again, I went to this conference. Here's the thing. It's like I wanted to teach Mark this typing, but I couldn't find the actual instructions, like how to do it. But I did try. I tried for a very long time. We would work when he was in middle school. We would sit down with the iPad and we would work on typing. Let's see. I heard in town there was a new speech therapist that has specialty in augmentative and alternative communication. And that's what typing is, like when you're using a device or something else to communicate through. So I got really excited about this, and Mark and I went to meet with her. She did a little assessment. Basically, she told me straight out, like just after a few minutes, like, oh, nope, he can't do this. So that was pretty frustrating. And, this just happens a lot. There's a lot of frustration. I just realized I'm way behind on my slides here, so I'm gonna try to speed it up a little bit. So then Mark, let me go back, and now we're gonna switch topics to his business. He graduated in 2019, and we immediately started the egg business. And the reason we picked this was because he can do a simple task, and at the time he could go and, like say, feed the dogs or feed the cats. He could do that, scoop it up, put it in the bowl. No problem. Also, he loves to be outside. He wants to be outside most of the time. He also loves bowling, like in that previous picture. So I'm just putting these things together in my head. I thought maybe the great thing about the egg business, obviously you have a product to sell on a regular basis pretty much all year long. They don't lay as well in this winter, but we still have a good amount of eggs. And also we're really fortunate here in Moscow. Idaho, we have this super great farmers market, and not a lot of other people were selling just eggs at the farmers market. Now I sell some things there too. We have a booth together like Mark and I do. But this worked out really great because there's close to 5,000 people come through the farmers market every weekend. Of course, a lot of people I sell to are mostly locals anyway, but it just worked out great. And we started the egg business and then our first eggs were ready to sell in March 2020, which of course was when COVID hit. But that's okay because we pivoted a little bit and just started delivering eggs to people in town. Here's a picture of when I was trying to teach Mark to type for communication on this iPad. So back to the business. So we actually would deliver the eggs. So we had the people put a cooler on their front porch, and then we would put the eggs in the cooler. So it was like no touch, because you couldn't touch anybody at the time, right? And this worked out great, and we're still doing the egg delivery business now. And Mark loves doing egg delivery. We do it every Wednesday. Okay, I'm gonna switch it. So that seems to be going really great. And he's actually, just to jump way ahead, he's actually spelled several times about his business and how he enjoys it. In fact, one thing he's just spelled last week, and I think they were doing a lesson about the Pony Express or about mail and how it used to be you had to wait for a letter for like a week, but now everything's instant. And she asked him if he would like to be a postmaster, but he said that he liked the job he had. And something he even said like, I like to get lost in my work on the farm or something to that effect. So he seems to really enjoy that. So that worked out great. That worked out great for us. So I'm going to talk a lot more about the spelling now. And I'm sorry this presentation's all over the place. I'm going to try to call in and I'll take questions at the end because I'd rather address questions than anything. So I know I'm really telling you something you want to hear. So one day, Mark, I know when Mark was still in school, I actually was working as a support broker. So this means that I was basically helping other families with children with disabilities or adults, self-advocates, to get some services in our town. Of course, once he graduated, I quit that job because I was a full-time caregiver for Mark now, and then we were starting, obviously, his egg business. So that was taking all the time, and I wouldn't be able to meet one-on-one with other people. But I got a text from one of my former employees, I guess, from a parent saying, hey, there's a lady in town teaching spelling to communicate. Because she knew that way back when, this was years ago, that I was trying to teach Mark to type for communication. And her son was non-speaking, and Mark's quote is considered minimally speaking because he can say some words. So she gave me the contact information. I was like, okay, but it was like March. And March on the farm, March or April, it was the spring, I remember, and I was just crazy busy trying to get stuff planted, and kind of got put to the back burner. Well, maybe like 3 weeks later, after she sent me that information, Mark and I were at the farm store, and we checked out, and we walked outside, and there was actually a young man standing there waiting for us, and he said, I work at the Jubilee School. Well, I knew the Jubilee School is a special school we have just for children with autism in Moscow. It's a very small private school. I think it might be a Christian school too of some sort. Anyway, I knew what it was specifically. And he said, there's a lady there that's teaching people with autism how to spell for communication. And so I was like, oh, you know what? I think I have her contact information. Let me look. And I went back to my text messages from my friend, and I'm like, is it Cynthia? And he's like, yes. So I'm like, okay, yes, I have it. I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to call her, or text her, I don't know, and get hooked up with that. So I figured when a total stranger comes up to you and says, hey, you should be doing this, I was like, better take it. I get it now. I'll tell you. Let's go down that road. Okay, so about the spelling. So then Cynthia started working with him. This was in 2022. So in June 2022, I think is when she started working with Mark, because she just worked with him one-on-one. So when you start out, you work with these stencils. I have a picture later. You'll see her holding up a stencil for Mark. And then he had a pencil, and he would poke at the letters to spell. And a big part of this is presuming competence. We are assuming that this person already knows how to spell, and then we're just kind of bringing that out of them, okay? And that he is a typical he would have been 21 years old at the time. He's a typical 21-year-old who's learned all this information his whole entire life, but just didn't have a way to get it out. So the idea behind the spelling is that you're changing a fine motor activity, which is speaking with your mouth, into a gross motor activity, which is pointing at the stencil with, and he would use a pencil at first. Now he uses a chopstick, but you take the chopstick and actually pokes the letters in the stencil, okay? So, I don't know if I should say any more about fine versus gross motor, but that's the basis of it, really. It sounds kind of simple in a way, but it's obviously much more complex than that. And what you're doing then by poking at the letters is that you're building new neural pathways in your brain, in his brain, to learn to spell the words he wants to say. So think of it kind of like when you first learned to drive a car. Remember when you first got in, you were so aware of everything, and you make sure you put your blinker on and just everything, pressing the gas pedal enough, pressing the brake enough, hard enough, and just learning all these new things, how to drive a car. Now I bet you just jump in your car and you go. And then you know how it is, sometimes you get to town and you're like, gosh, I don't even remember driving here. You're like daydreaming or something on the way. So now it's just like totally automatic. You just do it. So that's what we're trying to do now with the spelling. It's like we're building up these neural pathways so that it's more automatic for Mark. So we're kind of still in this acquisition phase of the spelling. And there is a hierarchy to the spelling. So right now he's working with a stencil board. Then we move to a laminate board. And with the laminate board, he actually pokes at the letters with his finger. And then you transition to a keyboard. And then the holy grail is that he'll just be able to sit down and type what he's saying. But it's not really that simple. Sometimes you still need a communication partner with them. Like when you're like riding a bike, you're teaching someone to ride a bike, and maybe you've got to the point where you're holding on to the handlebar in the back of the bike, then you let go of the handlebars, then you let go of the back of the bike, but you're still like running along beside them, like I'm here to catch you if you fall. So that's how it kind of gets to that point. Like you still need some support, someone there, but overall they can do it themselves at that point. So, but that's like way off for us, and different people learn at different speeds, I guess. So, for example, my friend who gave me the information about Cynthia to begin with, her son's 13 now, and he is like using a keyboard already. And so he basically started the same time Mark did, but he's already on a keyboard. Mark's still on the stencils, okay? So different people, just learning this new movement is taking a little bit longer for Mark. Now, Mark is like totally open with Cynthia, which open means he can spell anything. But I'm still working with him. And this is how the sessions go. We have a lesson plan. And the lesson can be about anything. Right now, we're doing one about Diwali, which is the festival of lights for Hindus. I think I should know this since we're doing the lesson. Anyway, we're doing the lesson on Diwali. So I have the lesson plan, and then I read a paragraph, and then I ask him questions about that paragraph. So the answers are specific to what we just talked about. So it has to be this way because I need to like coach him a little bit for the spelling to make sure he's going to do it correctly. So to start out, you have to do things that are always known, the known answers, I guess you might say. And then hopefully then you move on to like prior knowledge questions, which is things you just ask him a question. And sometimes they sneak these into the lesson. Ask him a question to see if he can answer it. Like, for example, there was one recently, what's the capital of Israel? Well, he just typed out Jerusalem, no problem. And also, let's see, prior knowledge. And then there's what they call the open-ended questions, where just a question you ask and he can answer it any way he likes to. So we can do some of the prior knowledge, and we're just starting to do some of the open questions he's just starting to do the open questions with me. But his accuracy is not always super great. So if he's off by a letter one way or the other, sometimes I have trouble trying to figure out what he's saying. Cynthia's really great at it. She can do it. She can get him back on track, but sometimes it just falls through when I'm working with him. So pray that Mark gets more accurate and that I have the wisdom to know what he's trying to tell me. One fun thing we found out, and Cynthia had told me this, is that a lot of these children with autism are like insanely good with math. And he did a really complicated math problem totally in his head last week. He did it with me, and I was so excited. Here, now I've got some pictures of his business, just a side note, when he started. These are his first chicks and his first ducks that he was raising for eggs. So last week we were doing a Thanksgiving lesson, and there was a question about, they said that Sarah Josepha Hale, she petitioned for 36 years to get Thanksgiving recognized as a federal holiday. So the question was, how many days is that? So he just poked it out. 36 times 365 equals, it's like 1,316, or I don't know what the answer is, but he knew it. I mean, he literally just did it there in his head. Like no paper, no pen, he just did it. So it's just amazing to see that happening. A couple other things I'm going to mention, and then I'll be done. Also, let's see. One time they were doing a lesson, this was very recently, and she asked him what his stage name would be. This is kind of like just an open question. And Mark said, hinged to him. And then I didn't know what this meant at first. And I was like, does he mean God? And then so the next week I made her ask him who him was. And it is God. So hinged to him with a capital H. I was so happy. And as soon as I get him open with me, I really want we want to go through confirmation with our church. So that's going to be pretty amazing. So here's presuming competence. That's Cynthia. I should go back, I guess. I can't go back. Okay. Well, that was Cynthia working with Mark with a stencil board. Oh, here's another thing I wanted to mention about building more neural pathways. So this was a couple years, this was actually before the pandemic. I was taking Mark to the gym at the University of Idaho. We had a routine worked out. And then a couple weeks ago, Cynthia said to me, they call it intentional movement. It's just exercise, okay? But the point is picking an activity and doing it like 10 times, doing 10 reps. This builds, again, the brain-body connection. It's a gross motor activity. He's building those neurons. So like he's stepping up and down on the block on the bottom, or he throws the ball up against the wall 10 times. So all this stuff is intentional movement. I'm like, oh, we used to do that all the time. So we're in the process of getting our gym membership renewed so we can get back to the gym and start building more neural pathways. It's all about the brain. I love this picture. His Aunt Darlene took this picture last summer. We were on a jet boat cruise down the Snake River. Okay, so I'm going to finish up now. I'm not going to try to read this because one time I tried to read this. This is the first time I recorded this and I started crying. But Mark can now make his thoughts known. He really, really wants to spell with Dad, he said. And next Monday, or this Monday, you're going to see this on Saturday. On Monday, Henry is going to take Mark to Cynthia, and he's going to learn how to do the spelling. And but I really think just Mark has something that he wants to say to Henry, and I'm just dying to know what it is. So it's so exciting. All right, so with that, I'm going to end, and I'm going to turn this recording off, and hopefully I'll be able to call in, and if anybody has questions, let me know. Thank you.